Assalamualaikum. I will be introducing about the ethics of genetically modified organism (GMO) in animal research.
Hi, I'm Ayuni, and I'll be presenting the literature review for our topic, the ethics of GMOs in animal research. So, what exactly are genetically modified animals? These are animals whose DNA has been deliberately altered, often to study human diseases, improve traits like growth rate, or even to produce things like medicines. While this science is impressive, it brings up a number of ethical concerns. One major is animal welfare. Genetic modification can sometimes cause suffering, like pain, deformities, or shorter lifespans. There's also the bigger question, is it right to change an animal's genetic just because we can? Today, GM animals are widely used in science and agriculture, and with new tools like CRISPR, we can edit genes faster and more precisely than ever before. But that also means we have a bigger responsibility to ask, are we being careful enough? Ethically, it's not just about what science can do, but what it should do. Researchers are being pushed to follow stricter guidelines, ensure human treatment, and think more about the social environmental consequences. In short, GM animals are powerful tools in modern science, but they raise real questions about how we balance innovation with compassion and responsibility.
Okay, so moving on to case studies, but before that, I'm gonna introduce myself. My name is Jelin, FA 24110089. So I'm gonna explain three case studies after this. Okay, so the first case studies is Enviro pig. Scientists develop genetically modified pigs, known as Enviro pigs, to produce less phosphorus in their manure, aiming to reduce environmental pollution. However, this project raised several ethical issues. One major concern was animal welfare, as the long-term health effects the genetic modification were unknown. There was a risk that the pigs might suffer from unintended biological complications. Other ethical issues was the lack of public transparency. The project proceeded without open and early discussion with the public, which raising concern about making significant genetic changes to animals without sufficient societal input. Okay, so moving on to the second case studies, which is genetically modified cows for increased milk production. So nowadays, cows have been genetically modified in several countries to increase milk production, enhance resistance to disease like mastitis, and also reduce allergens in their milk. However, these practices raise several ethical concerns. One concern is the physical impact on the animals, as genetic modifications for higher productivity can lead to increased stress, inflammation, or birthing complications. Critics also argue that modifying animals purely for human benefit treats them like machines, ignoring their intrinsic value as living beings. So this is basically wrong to genetically modified cows. Alright, so the last part of the case studies is onco mouse. A mouse was genetically modified to carry a gene that made it highly susceptible to cancer, with the purpose of advancing medical research. This scientific development brought about significant ethical concerns. One major issue was the suffering of the animals, as the mice were intentionally bred to develop painful and fatal conditions. This raised serious questions about the human treatment of animals in research. Harvard patented the genetically modified onco mouse, which sparked debate over whether it is morally acceptable to claim ownership of a living, genetically altered organism.
Today, we are looking at the ethical analysis of enviropics, genetically modified pig designed to reduce phosphorus pollution. While aim was positive, the project raised significant ethical concerns. Firstly, regarding animal welfare, there were worries about uncertain long-term health effects potentially violating the animal rights. Secondly, transparency and public engagement were limited, undermining the ethical integrity of the project by not fully involving the public. And finally, concerning environmental ethics and utility, while pollution reduction was a goal, sustainable alternatives may have been overlooked. Public skepticism and ethical concern ultimately led to the project discontinuation in some areas. In short, in conclusion, enviropics highlight the critical need to balance scientific innovation with thorough ethical consideration for animal well-being, public involvement, and the exploration of all possible solutions. This slide focuses on the ethical analysis of genetically modified cows. It highlights several key ethical considerations surrounding the genetic modification of these animals. Firstly, under animal welfare deontology, the increased milk production often associated with genetically modified cows may lead to stress, inflammation, and other health risks for the animals. This raises concern about violating their intrinsic animal rights. Furthermore, the lack of transparency and limited public discourse surrounding this modification compromise ethical integrity. Secondly, from an environmental, ethics and utility perspective, while genetic modification might offer disease resistance and reduce antibiotic use, it also raises significant ecological concerns that need careful consideration. And finally, this slide points to the consequences of this modification, noting that they often lead to ethical debates, public skepticism, and call for stricter regulation. Next, this slide delves into the ethical consideration surrounding the onco mouse. Developed for cancer research, these genetically engineered mice raise significant questions. Firstly, there's the animal welfare aspect. These mice are bred to develop painful conditions, directly impacting their well-being and sparking debate about animal rights in research. Other than that, the transparency and ownership surrounding the Oncomos, patented by Harvard, brings up concern about the morality of owning a living organism. Finally, the consequences of this technology fuel ethical debates about human treatment, advancement versus the cause of animal suffering, patenting life forms, and navigating complex regulatory challenges. In essence, in essence, the Oncomos presents a powerful case study in the indicate ethical landscape of modern scientific innovation. Thank you. I will give this record to my friends.
In conclusion, the use of genetically altered animals for experimentation brings immense scientific benefits and grievous ethical dilemmas. As GMOs have led to medicine and agriculture breakthroughs, they also raise concerns on animal welfare, environmental security, and the boundary of scientific intrusion. Examples of case studies like the OncoMouse and EnviroPic illustrate the importance of ethical control and transparency. Compliance with ethical principles such as utilitarianism and the 3 R's framework ensures that research is conducted ethically. In the future, it is necessary to balance innovation and compassion as well as public trust so that scientific progress is not at the expense of moral codes. That is all from us. Thank you for listening.